Hi, this is Mike from Sleep Can Wait. This is part 2 of your intro to MEF. So to begin with, I thought it would be beneficial to give a cursory glance at what we did in part 1 of intro to MEF. This is, as far as I know, the absolute simplest way to use MEF within an application. Definitely not recommended. That being said, I think it gives you a good idea of the kind of bare bones pieces of information that you need to utilize MEF within an application, in this case within a console application. So here we've got class host MEF in an application that's being called from program.cs from the main method. And there are a couple of important things to note here. One is that we've got a property of type iLogger that is being imported. Two is that we are composing this type by instantiating a composition container, and then composing the parts of this type by passing in the types that are capable of fulfilling our imported properties in this case. So if we run this, then we should see that some random logger is going to be used to fulfill the iLogger import, and when we call write to log after compose, then we should see this message printed to the screen. The only other thing I'd like to call out here is that the type someRandomLogger is exporting itself for type iLogger, which allows MEF to glue these two things together. So if we take a look at that real quick, then indeed we can see from someRandomLogger, blah, blah, blah. So great, that works. So for part 2, we're going to take this one step farther, and we're going to, instead of passing in the explicit hard-coded references, we are instead going to let MEF discover the references. So this doesn't necessarily, this isn't too different in terms of how we implement MEF, but it does give us one distinct advantage in that it means any class that's going to be using MEF, any type that uses MEF, doesn't need to know about all the implementations that are going to be needed when importing into another type. So in part 2, we've got something very basic. We've got a class called using an AssemblyCatalog, which is what we're going to be doing here. We're going to allow MEF to inspect the current assembly and allowing it to identify everything within the assembly that needs to be exported and imported. So the only other major difference here is that we have, instead of import, we've got import many. So we need that in order to use IEnumerable within this property. So the reason I've done that is because for iLogger, we now not only have some random logger, but we also have some other random logger. So this might be beneficial for something like logging, where you might want to log to the event viewer and email and to file or to a database, or the list goes on and on. Anyhow, so all we really have to do here is, if you remember from part 1, we are creating a new composition container with no arguments, and here we are creating a composition container. However, this time we are passing in an assembly catalog. So the assembly catalog is basically meant to be provided with an assembly, and then it will go and find all of the exports. So all we've done here is just say, I'm in using an assembly catalog, get my type, and get the assembly that I'm in, and we're passing that into the constructor for assembly catalog, and then using that assembly catalog to pass it into the composition container. Now the other difference is, because we are allowing MEF to kind of do its deal, we don't need to know about this type at design time. Rather, we will let MEF go out and figure out what we want to do. So if we run this, then we should see, in no particular order, a message from some random logger and a message from some other random logger. And so there you have it. We have some other random logger and some random logger. So again, this isn't really meant to be best practices or anything like that. Something along the lines of a better practice, in my opinion, would be to put this type of composition code within for within a console application, somewhere closer to the main method, and then retrieve types from the composition container so that all of their parts are already fulfilled. So we'll look at that in part 3. It won't be anything too challenging, but again, I'm really trying to break this down into small chunks so you can kind of see all of the different steps and pieces involved in using MEF from the ground up to using MEF with what I consider to be best practices. So anyhow, that's it for part 2 on your intro to MEF, and I will see you soon for part 3.